Unfit for crisis. Here's the headline in my LP News, the Libertarian Party News, Volume 47, Issue 4. Quote, as Donald Trump's warfare threats rise, libertarians call for withdrawal from NATO. How wrong can we be? Donald Trump is a mentally diseased degenerate. Donald Trump is the most out-of-control narcissist to wield supreme executive power since Caligula. Donald Trump's finger must be yanked away from the nuclear trigger. Donald Trump has forever tarnished America's brand as the citadel of freedom. Donald Trump has destroyed American prestige globally, perhaps forever. Donald Trump has ceded the field to Putin, his benefactor. Donald Trump has aligned America with dictators worldwide, lining his own pockets in the process. Donald Trump is a traitor. Donald Trump must be impeached. Thanks to Donald Trump, Putin has an opportunity to stride the globe like a colossus. So how does my party respond? Open the floodgates. Walk out of NATO and let Putin and his oligarchs do as they like. My party is ready to serve up Europe to Putin on a silver platter. Like the America First appeasers before Pearl Harbor, they imagine an isolationist America safe and secure in a totalitarian universe. Rather, now is the time for America to raise its nuclear shield for all humanity to rise up against their oppressors. Before I disassemble this rant, let me tell you where this argument is headed. A nation is a group of people united by a mistaken view of their past and hostility toward their neighbors. I shall urge that humanity has reached the threshold where an elected, representative, and sovereign United Nations is the safe harbor for freedom. The only American political party with an international philosophical appeal is the Libertarians. We are the only party which will survive, perhaps thrive, in an elected and representative United Nations. Moderate Democrats and Republicans will be folded into the Christian Democratic parties of Europe. The Freedom Caucus, what a gross misnomer, will fold into the fascist neo-Nazi parties. The Freedom Caucus will then be at an impasse and marginalized. They would have to ponder an expedient alliance with the fundamental Islamists. The Progressive Democrats will fold into the socialist parties of Europe. Then they would be at an impasse, wondering whether to surrender themselves to the statists in China. And I wonder how many statists would be elected in China in free and fair elections. An elected representative and sovereign United Nations will be a tremendous growth opportunity for the Libertarian Party. How ironic that, to get there, we must confront Putin and the oligarchs. Thank God that previous generations of Americans consented to the taxation which provides the means to confront the beast with a sufficient arsenal. To confront Putin and the oligarchs, we must first confront ourselves, all of us, all Americans, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Greens, even us Libertarians, are covered in fecal matter. Our olfactory senses may be so dulled that we do not pick up the stench, but the rest of the world is holding their collective nose, astonished that a once great, freedom-loving people could shit all over themselves by installing a mentally diseased degenerate, comic opera fascist, money-laundering traitor into the presidency. In comparison, Putin looks like the steady hand at the tiller. Take that to heart, sports fans. Donald Trump is so colossally unfit that the world looks to Putin for leadership. The world knows that Putin violated a solemn pledge to respect the territorial integrity of Ukraine. The world knows that Putin shot down the Dutch passenger plane, killing all aboard. The world knows that Putin has transformed the entire Russian economy into a vast criminal enterprise. The world knows that 71 Russian bankers have been murdered in order to consolidate the banking industry. The world knows that Putin is a whoremaster. The world knows that Putin breeds terrorism with his Islamophobic policies. The world knows that Putin condemned to death his own sailors aboard the Kursk. The world knows that Putin is an agent provocateur, bombing apartments in Moscow to stir up anti-Chechen hatred. The world knows that Putin murders journalists. The world knows that Putin arrests and murders whistleblowers like Magnitsky. The world knows that Putin is liquidating Christopher Steele's informants. The world knows that Putin uses polonium darts against political foes. Are you shocked that a comic opera fascist like Trump is more feared than a ravenous predator like Putin? Don't be. Putin at least takes the issue of nuclear war seriously. Compare that with our clown, who treats nuclear holocaust with the same level of gravity as an adventure in public onanism. Sad, isn't it? The American century came to an abrupt, obscene halt with the installment of Donald Trump into the presidency. Humanity will never forget this colossal collective brain fart. But we can cleanse away the feces. 30% of us, unfortunately, parade themselves in that stench as a badge of honor. We can impeach his fraudulency. True, he will be succeeded by an ideological troglodyte, but that troglodyte will be a mere placekeeper, and he is not mentally diseased. He doesn't really matter anyway. We matter. Cleansing ourselves matters. America has never been just about the United States. We began our country as an assertion of universal principles. It was all written down. America asserts the universal principle that the common man, everywhere, is a dignified soul. Any aspiring man or woman may cast their gaze upon heaven, to strive with all their might, to be all they might. Political freedom stokes this Promethean fire. This yearning is not confined within our borders. It does not stand atop a wall, hurling epithets at people of a different hue, speaking a different tongue. America has always been about more than blood and soil, even though a significant minority, 30% or so, can only think in tribal terms. It has always been that way. The freedom lovers in our country have always been tasked with the burden of dragging the tribalists out of the darkness into the light. Will we continue to allow the right-wing nutjobs to gerrymander the Congress and manipulate the Electoral College, imposing themselves as our masters upon us, the progressive majority? During colonial times, they pushed our submission to an hereditary aristocracy. During the Civil War, they pushed our submission to a landed, racist aristocracy. Before Pearl Harbor, they blocked our resistance to fascism until it was almost too late. This time around, they are sabotaging the exposure of Putin's conspiracy against the free world. The Tories in colonial America shared the aristocratic ideals of the British Empire. Confederate America pursued the ideal of a racial hierarchy. The America First crowd, before Pearl Harbor, shared Hitler's vision of a global slavocracy. Today, the America First crowd shares Putin's vision of a fascist client oligarchy. Don't believe me? Not long ago, pollsters asked Americans a simple question. Do you have an unfavorable view of Putin's Russia? 82% of Republicans and 72% of Democrats answered yes. In 2017, the results of the same question, 73% of Democrats and 41% of Republicans answered yes. That 41% leakage of Republicans, no doubt, are convinced that Putin has made Russia great again. Really? The Russian economy, with a large population and plentiful resources, is about the size of Italy's. So great is the burden of institutionalized corruption. Do we really want to go down that road? Do you ever wonder whether our super-rich envy the Russian oligarchs? Envy their arrogance? Envy the impunity with which they steal whatever they desire, free of consequence? Envy the submission of the common people to their whims? Envy the brutal destruction of all critics? Envy their withdrawal from the social contract? Consider the cost. Not only is the Russian economy a tiny fraction of its potential, but look at the trashing of human potential. Why do you suppose they drink to blackout? Their submission, generation after generation, to the great abusing father in the Kremlin has robbed them of their self-respect. They make a cult of that submission, the stoic acceptance of helplessness, the stoic resignation to the crushing of personal ambition and dreams, submission, abject submission. Grasp the enormity. Vladimir Putin, in a public forum, praised Russian prostitutes as the best in the world. Obviously, he was trying to boost sex tourism. Who can doubt that Putin is taking a ruble or two out of every prostitute's ass on every trick pulled in Russia? And this glorified pimp strides the globe like a colossus, and the President of the United States is honored to be his stooge. And precisely what makes Russian prostitutes the best in the world? The cult of submission, of course. Everyday life in Russia is the perfect training ground for whores. Degradation, soul-destroying submission to arbitrary political power, teaches the prostitute more about the oldest profession than any doctoral course in biology ever could. Americans, do you really want to stroll down this road? Andrei Makine, in Dreams of My Russian Summers, describes, quote, Russian life, a strange amalgam of cruelty, compassion, drunkenness, anarchy, invincible joie de vivre, tears, willing slavery, stupid obstinacy, and unexpected delicacy. A Russia pitted against the world by its somber destiny. The invisible Russia, a continent encircled by barbed wire and watchtowers. In this forbidden country, the simplest words took on a fearful significance. Burn the throat like the bitter stuff that I drank from a thick glass tumbler. I love it for its absurdity, for its monstrosities. I see in it a higher meaning that no logical reasoning can penetrate. This love was a continual heartbreak. The blacker the Russia I was discovering, the more violent my attachment became. As if to love it, one had to tear out one's eyes, plug one's ears, stop oneself thinking. Unquote. From here, Makine launches into the story of Beria, Stalin's chief of secret police, Putin's spiritual ancestor. What is to be done? First, obviously, we must impeach Putin's stooge. That will clear away the obstruction to the imposition of sanctions. That, too, should break the resistance to taking measures protecting ourselves from Russian meddling in our elections. Unless, of course, the Republican Party, as a whole, is more compromised than I think. This, for me, is just a start. Putin set a fire in our rear. I want to set a fire in his rear. Our military strategy, given his possession of nuclear weapons, must be defensive and protective of our allies. Our political strategy, on the other hand, must be aggressive. We entered that struggle bearing the stench of the 2016 election and the appalling spectacle of a mentally diseased degenerate wielding presidential powers. We are a laugh line for humanity. Nonetheless, we must press on. Only we possess the military might to deter Putin, to restrain him, to frustrate his plan to transform the global economy into a vast, corrupt, client oligarchy. Imagine it. Force yourself to imagine it. Then coldly and disenthralled conceive the master counterstroke. Our political objective must be the transformation of the United Nations into an elected and representative, hence legitimate, body. We must complete the business left unfinished by the Second World War. Our nuclear arsenal, which our right-wing nuts see as a tool to extort concessions from the rest of the world, can be used as a nuclear umbrella beneath which freedom-loving peoples everywhere can rise up against their oppressors. In close consultation with freedom-loving peoples facing the Russian menace, we can adopt a defensive and protective posture which, hopefully, will deter Putin and the oligarchs. If Putin crosses that frontier, our allies must defend themselves on the ground. We will provide the air and naval power to devastate Russian logistics. Again, the more credible our posture, the more effective the deterrent. We will need pilots. 100,000, 200,000, a million, whatever it takes. Putin's countermove will be to try to draw us into a proxy war somewhere. We must not take the bait. Our advantage lies in our mobility. We must be ready with an overarching political solution. There is a software program called Maptitude. The Republicans perverted it to serve the ends of Project RedMap, the national gerrymander. But the most fair state, Iowa, also uses Maptitude. They use it properly to implement the elections statute. Maptitude.